She was left tied beneath a dead tree in the Arizona desert, waiting for the sun to finish what outlaws had started. A lonely rancher could have ridden past, but instead he chose to stop. One night of courage turned generations of hatred into something neither of them expected. Hey there, folks! Before we dive into this gripping tale of courage and unexpected connections in the wild deserts of Arizona, let me just pause and connect with you real quick. Where are you tuning in from right now? Maybe a bustling city, a quiet countryside, or somewhere exotic? And what's the time over there? Drop it in the comments below, and if you're enjoying these stories that blend history, heart, and humanity, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that might just change how you see the world. All right, let's saddle up and get into it. The sun cast a faint glow over the vast deserts of Arizona, where the wind silently carried grains of sand through the air. Jack Harl, a weathered rancher in his late 50s, stood beside his horse, his hat casting a shadow over his face as his eyes settled on a terrifying sight. Beneath a tree with dry, lifeless branches, a woman dressed in traditional Apache clothing was tied with ropes. Her hands and feet were wounded and bloodied, her body bent in pain. "It hurts there," she whispered weakly, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and agony. Jack's heart pounded. Never in his life had he seen someone in such condition, and his mind battled between stepping back or stepping forward. He froze. In all his years on the frontier, he'd learned to stay out of such matters. The Apaches were a proud people. Their history with settlers like him was steeped in blood and betrayal. Stories from his grandfather's time still echoed: raids, skirmishes, an unbridgeable divide between worlds. He could walk away, leave her to her fate. It was the safe choice, the expected choice. But something in her eyes, open with vulnerability, yet fierce with determination, held him there. She was not much older than his own daughter had been before fever took her years ago. Swallowing hard, Jack stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching against the dry earth. "Ma'am, you're badly hurt," he called, his voice rough from disuse. Her name was Nita, as he would later learn. She was from the White Mountain Apache Reservation, miles away, where her people struggled to survive on the same harsh land that had claimed so many lives. She had been gathering herbs for her sick mother when outlaw bandits, men who preyed upon anyone crossing these desolate trails, ambushed her. They tied her, beat her, and left her to die beneath the relentless sun, her wrists and ankles rubbed raw by rough rope. When Jack knelt beside her, she flinched, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she no longer had. "Go away, white man," she gasped, her accented English clear despite the strain. "I don't need your pity." Jack raised his hands, palms open. "It's not pity, ma'am, just human decency. Those wounds look bad. They could already be infected." He looked around. The vast emptiness mocked him. The nearest town was half a day's ride away, and night was falling fast. Leaving her meant certain death, exposure, or predators. But helping her? That could bring trouble with her people. Worse, it could stir old disputes in a land where memories ran long. Still, he could not leave. Unthinkable as it was for a man raised on stories of hostility, he pulled out his knife and carefully cut the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. She groaned as blood returned to her limbs, her face twisted in agony. "Why?" she murmured, studying his face. "You owe me nothing." As he helped her to her feet, her weight leaning heavily against his shoulder, Jack felt something unexpected. A pull, a reminder of the humanity he had buried beneath years of solitude. His ranch was isolated,
a refuge after losing his wife in childbirth and his daughter to illness. Kindness had felt like a luxury he could not afford, a weakness in a world that took without mercy. But there, with Nita leaning on him, her labored breath near his ear, he realized how hollow that armor had become. They moved slowly toward his horse, each step a battle against her pain and his doubts. By the time they reached the animal, the sky had turned purple, stars beginning to shine like distant hopes. The journey back to his ranch tested their endurance. Nita clung to the saddle horn, her body trembling from pain and exhaustion, while Jack walked beside the horse, guiding it. He spoke to fill the silence, fragments of his life, endless droughts, cattle drives, quiet nights by the fire with only memories for company. To his surprise, she answered in kind. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke of her tribe's traditions, sacred dances beneath the moon, stories passed down by elders about living in harmony with the land. "We are not so different," she said at one point, her words cutting through the night air. "We both fight to hold on to what the world tries to take away."
When they reached his small adobe cabin, Jack helped her inside and laid her on his cot. Her wounds were worse than he had thought, deep cuts in her wrists and ankles, some already infected from dirt and neglect. He boiled water on the wood stove and brought his sparse medical supplies, whiskey for disinfectant, clean bandages, a needle and thread from his sewing box. As he cleaned her wounds, she bit down on a leather strap to muffle her cries. "It hurts there," she groaned again, tears tracing lines through the dust on her cheeks. Jack's hands trembled. He had stitched cattle before, but never a person. What if her people came searching and took his actions as an offense? But as he looked into her eyes, he did not see an enemy. He saw a reflection of his own suffering. A realization wrapped around him. The walls he had built were not protecting him, they were imprisoning him. Kindness was not weakness, it was the bridge across the chasms everyone had dug. With steady hands he stitched the deepest wounds. The needle pierced flesh in rhythm with his pounding heart. Nita gripped his arm, her nails digging into his skin, but she did not protest. When he finished, he gave her a cup of chamomile tea from his provisions and sat beside her as fever overtook her. All through the night he cared for her, cooling her forehead, murmuring words of encouragement that felt strange on his tongue. Delirious, she spoke in Apache, fragments of prayers and pleas that touched something deep inside him. For the first time, Jack confronted his inherited fears. He had always seen the Apaches as other, as a shadowed threat. But here was Nita, a daughter, a healer, a woman fighting for her family, just like him. At dawn, golden silence filled the cabin, and her fever finally broke. "You saved me," she said simply. Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. She shook her head. Not anyone. Not in this world. Whew, what a moment of raw connection right there, isn't it? As Jack and Nita share that quiet dawn, let's take a quick breather in the heart of this story. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Perhaps under the same starry sky or in a cozy room far away? And what's the time ticking away at your end? If this tale of bridging divides and finding common ground is hitting home, smash that like and subscribe so we can keep these heartfelt narratives coming your way, blending right into the adventure. Over a simple breakfast of cornbread and coffee, She told him more about her mother's illness, about poverty and land loss on the reservation, and for the first time in years, he truly listened. When she asked about his family, he hesitated before sharing the story of his daughter Emma. She was only 8, he said, his voice breaking as tears rose uninvited. Nita placed her hand over his. "The spirits take," she said softly, "but they also return in ways we do not expect." News spread quickly, as it often does in open lands. By midday, riders from the reservation appeared on the horizon, Nita's brother and cousins alerted by her absence. Jack's stomach tightened. This could end badly. He stepped outside, unarmed, hat in hand. "She's inside, safe." The men dismounted cautiously, hands near their rifles. Nita came out limping but alive and explained everything. Her brother, a tall man named Tassa, looked at Jack with suspicion. "You helped her? Why?" Jack held his gaze. "Because she's human. Like me. Like you." What followed was an emotional climax none of them expected. Tassa's expression softened. Instead of confrontation, he extended his hand. "We owe you a debt." Jack shook his head. "No debts, just understanding." In a profound gesture of compassion, Jack invited them inside, sharing his scarce water and food despite the drought. In return, Tassa promised help with Jack's ranch, mending fences, showing him hidden springs to sustain his herd. It was an act of generosity that bridged generations of mistrust, turning suspicion into alliance. Nita embraced Jack tightly. "You did the unthinkable," she whispered. "You chose heart over fear." As the riders departed with Nita, Jack stood on his porch, watching them fade into the distance.
The land seemed less hostile now. The mesas stood as witnesses to change instead of division. In the days that followed, Jack visited the reservation. They exchanged stories and skills. He learned Apache words for friend and healing. In return, he shared his rancher's wisdom. The once lonely man discovered a community he never knew he needed. Years later, Jack would realize that the faint cry beneath that lifeless tree had not only been Nita's pain, it had been a call to his own buried humanity. In a world quick to divide, kindness was the unthinkable force that united. It reminded him and all who heard the story that selflessness is not a grand gesture, but a quiet choice, one that ripples outward, healing wounds we never knew we carried. And in that healing lies the true power of our shared humanity, hopeful, enduring, and unbreakable. And there you have it, the end of this powerful story that shows how one act of kindness can rewrite divides and heal old wounds. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you catching this tale from, and what's the time looking like on your clock? If it moved you or made you think twice about the bridges we can build, give it a like. Subscribe for more stories like this that blend adventure with life lessons, and let's keep the conversation going in the comments.